Good morning, everybody. So we are in car scraping month. So this morning, as I got my very rubbish car scraper, taking off the frost of the windscreen, we're entering certainly into the winter months. We've got a lockdown period that we're experiencing until at least the 2nd of December. So therefore, for many businesses here, this is coming up to the golden month. So your sales line would have taken a hit. Some traders would have not suffered as much, especially if you're moving online. Any plans that you had put together in terms of that you've made up until yesterday, if you'd factored things in like furloughing, self-employed grants, whatever financial support you've got in this current epidemic, pandemic, whatever you want to call it, rip those up, put them in the bin. We've had a new update in terms of the furlough. We've had a new update in terms of the self-employed grant. I'm not going to take all the credit, but Richie has been listening to our broadcast and has modified the schemes as predicted. There's a few other things that I'm going to share with you. And I think one thing I would stress, as I always stress to people that I know, clients and otherwise, is you can't change what's going on in the world necessarily. So, none of us can actually clamp down and say, take me back to something more positive, but you can certainly change the way that you react to these things. So if you're in business, then certainly you need to try and retain a modicum of calm. You need to try and look at the situation here and react accordingly. I certainly will tell you, all of you, that there are many groups of people who've been missed out from the government support scheme. I shall comment on that towards the end. We know that self-employed, that started in the 1920 year. We know that company directors who largely draw out dividends to reward themselves, who are not on a payroll scheme, there's no financial support there. We know there are cash pressures still on overheads. I'll address those towards the end, but the focus of today, guys, is to let you know what the updates were as of yesterday on two of the main schemes that affects self-employed and employers and employees, and that's furloughing and self-employed grants. My name's Mahmood. I am an accountant who's been in business for about 25 plus years. I've seen lots of different economic environments, from the very positive and growing upwards to the, shall we say, challenging. Never seen anything to this extent, but in terms of there are certain factors that we need to take on board. And certainly one of them is actually understanding, cutting through the noise, trying to assimilate what's going on, being very reactive in our planning. There are some lessons that we can draw certainly from the first lockdown period, but my job is to cut through the noise, condense everything that I picked up from yesterday and before, tell you what the main information is that you need, how to get it all together, and how to effectively move your business forward. I will give you a little bit of a warning. By the time I finish this broadcast, it's quite likely by lunchtime or tomorrow, there'll be another set of rule changes. If there is, then I shall be there to capture that and relay that on to you. If you're coming on to replay, thank you very much for your company. If you're on live, thank you very much for your company as well. In terms of those people catching up on replay, hit the magic hashtag replay, chuck in a comment or just say hi, whatever you want to, so I know you're out there. If you've got a question that we don't fully capture during this next, say, 25 minutes, half an hour maximum, so the working day can begin, then put it into the comments box. I'll pick that up and I'll get that back to you. Everything I'm talking about today is on our website, proactiveresolutions.com. We've updated pretty much all the guidance since day one. So we've been there in terms of communicating what's going on. At times like this, obviously, apart from normal tax return season, make sure you get your accountants on side. Your accountants are going to play a vital role in helping you assimilate and get that information. And we've got, time to gather that together. So without further ado, let's crack on with the broadcast. I'm sure there'll be things I've missed out and otherwise. So we come back to the magic PowerPoint presentation. This is not death by PowerPoint, but this is effectively summarizing the main things we need to cover. Bang. So ticker tape at the bottom, always nice to have that. So coming into here, actually learning the factual information about, what you've got to do to make a claim. It's all really relevant, but you've got to try and keep calm. And I know it's difficult. We've got winter months. We've got a couple of months to go. We've got about 7 weeks, roughly speaking, before Christmas. Christmas hasn't been cancelled. It might be in modified form. You've got about 8 weeks before the magic B word, and that B word is Brexit. I will be doing future broadcasts, by the way, on Brexit, obviously not from a political point of view, but in terms of what you've got to do to get geared up, things like VAT, things like trading, things like does anything change. Europe has been quite heavily integrated into what we do in the UK since 71, but again, more about that later on. So a lot of stuff going on. Keep calm. Make sure, as I always say, you get your business story correct. So you might have ripped it up slightly since yesterday and thought, oh gosh, I might have made some decisions about staff that I'm keeping on. I might have made some decisions about funding. Again, I'll relay all that to you, but your business story should be adaptable, should be flexible, and numbers absolutely critical. They're your best friend. They're not going to lie to you. They're going to help and guide you. So make sure you've got a good grip on those because they will feed in. And the number one thing that you need to do, documentation wise, get a cash flow together. I'll mention that at the end of the broadcast for a webinar that's coming up. It's free. I'm going to share a cash flow template and guide you through what you need to do. But your cash flow story, I promise you, will be invigorating, liberating, and it will reduce any anxiety that you have. And I suppose lastly, whatever goes on in your business, you either choose to close doors, that's your decision, or you think, do you know what? As I've seen lots of business owners doing, it's that resilience, it's that adaptability. Your head might be going like through a spin cycle, but effectively you're still powering forward. You've got to take action. You are the decision maker. Don't be passive. Don't hide under the duvet. Don't think it will go away and do that, because it won't. So you need to take charge accordingly. Right, let's get on Viv Zimit on here. So let's talk furlough first of all. As of today, the approximate cost of the furlough scheme is about £6 billion per month, they're estimating. I'm not talking about the merits of the furlough scheme, what they should do, whether we can retarget support, but effectively the furlough scheme since yesterday has been changed. Effectively, here's the things that we need to know, because there will be now some people who weren't on the furlough scheme before, who weren't eligible before. So we've got some here. Just a pause there. I'm getting a couple of comments coming in. So feedback on the speech. Now, I take it by feedback, we're talking noise feedback as opposed to anything else that's going on. So let's have a pause. We don't want to spoil the listening experience. Just talk amongst yourselves for a second or two. No idea what's going on. So let's have a look. Let's turn that off. Let's turn that off. Jem is obviously coming on to help me out here, but I have no idea what's going on. So technology, so apologies for the feedback, double voiceover, but at least you get the message repeated. Let's go, let's take out that. Thank you for that comment. Do I know what's going on? The answer is no. Let's not panic in a crisis. Let's keep calm. Hope that settles down as time goes on. So overview. So furlough scheme is employee hibernation. So effectively, you can be an employee of your own company. So if you're a director, you're the only person running in your company. As long as you've got a payroll scheme that's been operative and you've submitted what's called an RTI by the 30th of October, thumbs up, you're eligible. If you've got members of staff, thumbs up, you're eligible. It also means you can have any employment contract whatsoever. So you can have full-time members of staff, part-time, agency workers, makes no odds, 0-hour contracts, all fair game. There is a process. HMRC have stepped up the compliance activity. So there's some tightening also of the rules, by the way. So one needs to be very, very careful here, as I've always said. So again, you need to take that on board as well. So there's an actual process. The doors open next week. And obviously there's a grant. So this is not a loan. You don't have to pay it back unless you've falsely claimed it or incorrectly claimed it. So it's a grant that you will receive. In terms of when, how much, if we go through the broadcast, I'll share that with you. Now, conditions. You've got to go through a process. So in other words, you can't just impose furloughing on your staff. You can't just say, you're on furlough, this is what your new wages are. You've got to go through a consultation process. You've got to communicate this in writing. HMR will expect to keep that consultation process evidence of They expect you to keep evidence of the record, the letters that you're sending out to employees on file for 6 years. They have the right, and I would suspect they are likely to ask to see that evidence as well. So effectively, employment rights do not get negated. You've got to go through a consultation process. You've got to get agreement. Now, your employees don't have to communicate back in writing, by the way, but they need to be aware and they need to agree it. So you can't just say, this is what's going to happen. You've got no choice, guys. You've got to get that agreement. In my experience, most employees will be receptive to the idea. Consultation, communication has got to be really, really important here. In this, I'll call it furlough scheme mark 373, but in this furlough scheme, there is no minimum time required to be worked. So somebody could work, say, 35 hours of a normal working week, be furloughed for 2 hours, you're eligible for a claim. The salary is normally, again, referenced by what's called a regular salary. And I've got a couple of slides here in a moment with some numbers to illustrate what happens if you, A, had employees on your payroll, brackets did filed a claim for them by 23rd of March 2020, what's called an RTI claim even. If you've had staff taken on after that date, you won't have been eligible for the first furlough, but you will be eligible for this one. So, however, you may have employees that get a fixed wage. There's one set of calculations. You may get employees that have a variable pay. So you might do a certain number of hours in 1 month. You might get overtime factored in there, holiday pay, etc. So those pays are fluctuating. And I'm going to show you how you work out what's called your regular pay, which is one of the things we need to do the furlough. Good to know. Now, if somebody is on SSP, say statutory sick pay, they're not entitled to furlough, but you as the employer have a choice with consultation. You can, if you decide for business reasons to retain them, you can move them onto furlough. Obviously, they come off statutory sick pay. But that's your decision, a commercial decision that you make. So you do have that element of flexibility. Now, what's the start date? For me, there is one scheme that kicks in from the 1st of November. That's when it runs from. However, there are two variations in terms of how you work out the pay reference point and the regular pay, and that depends on when your employees started with you. Now, let's have a think of the first one. If you've had employees for which you've submitted what in tax terms and payroll terms they call an RTI submission, so it's basically you run a payroll for the end of, say, February, you press the button, you submit that report to HMRC. If it's got there by the 23rd of March, bingo, then you use the calculations in reference to that period of time prior. If you've taken somebody on after the 23rd of March effectively and you didn't submit an RTI claim for them by the 23rd, which you wouldn't have done, then you won't have been eligible for the first furlough claim necessarily. However, you can claim for the second one, and the pay calculations run from effectively the start of the new tax year. So again, just make sure your records are there to identify which employees you can furlough, which ones you can't. Effectively, if you've also had a situation, by the way, where somebody has been employed by you and you've submitted a return for them, i.e. you told HMRC what you paid them, you've told HMRC how much tax you've taken off, if relevant, and national insurance. If they were with you on the 23rd of September and you had to make a decision to make them redundant, or somebody's got a fixed term contract up to the 23rd of September and then you terminated the contract, you didn't renew it. If you take them on after that date, then they can be furloughed as well. So that's something good to know. Non-employees, so freelancers, unfortunately, you're not claiming for freelancers, you're not claiming for subcontractors. Freelancers and subcontractors are not employees. If you're a director of your own company and you do not take a wage, you do not put yourself through PAYE, you will not be classified as an employee for the purpose of the furlough claim. So you will be excluded. Other things to bear in mind, again, we've broadcast on this before, we've got the information that's out there. Any job support scheme that was due to come in, and this is going back at least 2 or 3 iterations, that was due to come in on the 1st of November, bye-bye to that, that's deferred is not coming into effect. If it does come in to effect, the job support scheme in its previous incarnation, that will come in round about the 1st of April 2021, because furloughing, as announced yesterday, is going to run up to the end of March 21, which is actually 1 month less than the furlough scheme, literally a couple of days before that. So effectively, job support is on ice. Whether it actually does kick in, whether it does run, we'll find out more about that in January, when the first tranche, when the scheme will be first reviewed. As far as the job support bonus, if you've been factoring in that £1,000 bonus for keeping somebody on the books up until the end of January 2021, that's on pause. Obviously, the government is saying now, actually, if you've got a furlough scheme going, for which you're going to be paying 80% of regular wages up to a cap, well, we're not going to give you a bonus on top of that. So the job retention bonus, if you factor that into your cash flows, you need to remove them because you're not going to get them coming in. I suspect if they do resurrect the job retention bonus, it's going to run between effectively the 1st of April 21 up till the end of June 21. So it's unlikely the job retention bonus will resurrect itself at least until the 1st of April if the government decide to bring it back. If circumstances are such, they think actually we're making a good recovery, policy is such that they're moving money somewhere else, then don't expect to see the job retention bonus. So for planning purposes, set everything to zero. It's frustrating if you've done your cash flow planning, if you've done your rostering, if you thought I can make this work, I'm going to get a bonus coming in around about February. It's unfortunate, it's not going to apply. So pause that, take it out of your calculations. We don't know when it's going to come back in, if at all. If it does, I suspect it's not going to come back in at least until the 1st of April, and it's going to run effectively up till the end of April, May, end of June. Now, the claim will open its doors on the 11th of November, strictly speaking, at 8 a.m. Now, I remember with fond memories, that in terms of the first furlough grant claim application being opened, they'd refined the process. I think they did a brilliant job of getting it pretty much geared up. Obviously, they've got the first experience and the first lots of furloughs, but the doors open 8 a.m. When I say the door, the online doors open 8 a.m. on the 11th of November, which is effectively next Wednesday. So this gives you time to gather the data that you need to actually make that claim. Now, again, depending on how you've done the claim, pretty much all our clients who run payroll schemes got us to do the claims, which is great. Do them yourself if you wish. I would certainly get your accountants involved in this application. Accountants can do the payroll claim for you, the grant claim. You can do it yourself, obviously, but they've got to be registered for PAYE online. If they're not, you've taken on a new payroll provider. Just make sure they've got the authority and they know what to do. So you've got to get really geared up for that. But actually, the door's open. Effectively, 80% of your regular pay, subject to a cap. I've got some numbers to share with you, so that will bring some life to it, hopefully. And there is no minimum period. So what this means is two things. First of all, the claim period has got to be a week, minimum 7 days. So you can't put in claim for a 5-day period. You have to put in a claim for a 7-day period, minimum. You can claim to coincide with your pay periods. You can claim in advance of paying out your employees. And there's no minimum time that your employee's got to work. So in other words, they can literally be furloughed for 1 hour and you can claim 1 hour's worth of furlough. They can be fully furloughed. I don't work for you at all, and you can claim for that entire period. The scheme is due to be reviewed in January 21. So the government are going to look at things like what's the impact on the furlough scheme been? What's the pressure on them for putting support in other directions? There's a lot of things going on. And also January 21, I would imagine, is also good timing because that's when we know it's that wonderful time of year that at least half, maybe slightly less than half of tax returns, personal tax returns are submitted. So the government will know fully how much money it's got to play with what the pressure points will be. So again, watch this space. Again, they've committed yesterday to pay 80% up to the end of March. These schemes change, so there we have it. I'm just going to pause there for a second. So let me bring that question on. Okay, now interesting, Richard. So if you've got reduced turnover because of government restrictions, let me flag that. That's a great question, Richard. So let me do my best to answer that. Let me just keep that question on there so it reminds me. Now, effectively, here's a couple of depend situations here. We have, for example, businesses that are not working or closed. Then you've got effectively a discretionary grant distributed by the local authority. So check out your local authorities. I'll mention this at the end. You've got also a what they call a restriction grant. If your business is closed, you'll get sum of money linked to the rateable value of your property. £1,000 it starts from, up to £1,500 every 3 weeks. There's nothing in the guidance yet, by the way, about pro-rating. So it's going to be, it suggests it's going to be closed for at least 3 weeks. If it's closed for longer than that, then obviously you'll get another tranche of money on top of it. The £1,500 grant, by the way, which is discretionary, is more geared towards businesses that aren't necessarily registered for rates. It is discretionary. When I looked at about 3 or 4 local authority websites, which is quite sad, over the last few days, many of them have said, watch this space. They don't expect to announce details until effectively, well, pretty much yesterday, today. So check out your local authority website. If you've not done that before, whatever your local rating authority is, go onto the website. There should be something like coronavirus update, and there will be a section there for business support. So check that out. It will be worthwhile doing that. Other things about reduced turnover but government restrictions, Richard, all I would say then at this stage, and I'm going to mention it on the roundup at the end, are things like in your personal situation. So when I talk about cash flows, you need to do a personal budget as well, because the two, for me, are very closely connected. So there's things that you might be able to manage in your personal time, in terms of actual, whether it's universal credit, whether it's mortgage holidays, talking to your credit card companies, all those things are on the table. Mortgage holidays is the only thing that's been mandated, but again, I'll come back to that at the end. So apart from that, as of today, and I checked this literally about 5 minutes before I came on the broadcast, there's nothing new that's been announced. My personal opinion is there will be more coming. In terms of those people who've been missing out on self-employment, I'm going to mention that when we come to that slide. Here's my thoughts about what I think is likely to happen. If I'm wrong, then I've just taken a punt and I've got it wrong. If I'm right, I shall bask in the glory of being a perfect predictor. So let's come back to the furlough scheme. So Richard, hopefully that answered your question. So effectively, yeah, Richard, I know you always work hard, no problem at all. So good luck with everything that's going on. You know where we are. So remember, doors open 8 a.m. next Wednesday. So get your stuff together, get the data collected. What that data is, I'll point out in a second. You've got to claim for at least a week. You can claim in advance of paying your employees. You can claim after you paid employees. The choice is yours. Now, under the original furlough scheme, they said that has to be at least 14 days. So if you pay somebody, let's say the first week, you pay them monthly. At the original furlough claims, the earliest you could claim was 14 days before the end of that month. That's been relaxed. It's entirely up to you, but for planning purposes, I would still factor in that 2-week window. If you pay every week, you can claim every week. If you pay monthly, you claim monthly. Now, here's where we get to 2 variations. I've lost count of how many variations from the furlough scheme there have been since it first started. I think last count was about 60, 65. And there are going to be many more there as well. So if your head's not exploding, mine's one is certainly getting saturated with all this stuff. But, it's good stuff. Got to cut through the noise and got to communicate that information out. Now, there are 2 calculations, because what the furlough is based on is saying, what's your regular pay? Take 80% of that regular pay, compare it to what the maximum is that you can claim, and that is your claim. And what they do, this salary calculation depends on when your employees were with you and when you submitted an RTI claim, if I can pronounce it, well, there's my teeth loosened. That tells me I need an injection of coffee. My apologies for that, everyone. So, if you've had what's called an RTI claim, and if you're sitting at home thinking, what on earth is an RTI claim? It means real-time information. So, when you run a payroll, when you're registered for a payroll, you submit your information electronically. Now, if you've submitted a claim for somebody effectively up to the 19th of March, bingo, then what you do, you use the calculations that you would have done at that point. So, in other words, what was their fixed monthly pay at February 20? If it was fluctuating, then you take an average. So whatever the calculations were for the first furlough scheme, that's the one the government are saying that you should be using. And typically, somebody's either on a fixed salary, no fluctuation in pay, or it varies. So if you claimed previously, or you're entitled to claim previously, use those numbers. And again, if you check out proactiveresolutions.com, go to the news section on the website, and there are lots of illustrations that we've got for people on fixed pay, variable pay. So that's a good reference point, everyone, to check out. Have a look at that. Now, here's the second variation. Now, if you've submitted an RTI claim for, say, a new member of staff, so you weren't eligible for the first one, and remember, you can claim the furlough that's been announced as of yesterday, even if you weren't eligible for the first one. Now, effectively, what it takes into account now for this second scheme is your salary. So effectively, post 19th of March 2020, there are two options. Again, if somebody's on a fixed salary, so their pay does not fluctuate each month, then what you do, you take the last month pay at the last submission at October 20. So if they're paid, let's say, £2,000 a month, and that's what you submitted in October, that's the figure that you take as the regular pay. Now, if the pay fluctuates because they work overtime perhaps, or because there's no fixed contracts, or because, you know, there's other things like worked overtime in there, then obviously the pay is going to be going up and down. And therefore, what you need to do is to think, okay, how do I work out what their regular weekly pay is or what their regular monthly pay is? You may see other terms used like normal. I'm going to be using the word regular. So regular brackets normal pay, what do you use? Now, what the government has said is as follows. If they were with you after the 19th of March 2020, then from the start of the tax year 1920, i.e. the 6th of April 2020, up to the day they become furloughed, or strictly speaking, the day before, work out how many days that are in that period, including the days they're not working. Take into account how much pay they earned in total, and then from that, work out an average week and an average monthly pay. So if they're with you after the 19th of March, count the number of days from the 6th of April up until the day before they become furloughed. Work out the number of days, work out the pay in that period, and then use that to work out a figure that represents the average week or the average month. If they started with you after the 6th of April, let's say, for example, beginning of June, then you count from the 1st of June up until the day before they become furloughed. Now, if your head's not getting pressured under the strain, you're in perfectly good company. What I'm going to show you in a few moments is some numbers just to illustrate that, just to make that slightly easier. And again, if you check out the website, check out the news sections, I'm sharing some of these numbers with you via that mechanism. So we're going to be updating some of our news articles to reflect it. Now, make a note here. The deadlines are much stricter now compared to what we had effectively October. Now, if you haven't yet made your claims to cover the October 20 period, you've got until the end of November. If you miss the deadline, you're going to miss out. So if you've got any outstanding claims whatsoever, you've got until the end of this month, November 2020, to make the claims. Once you get past the end of November, you will not be able to claim retrospectively for anything you've missed out on. So if you haven't done it, make the claim. If you get somebody else to do that, just make sure they've actually made the claims for you or are in the process of doing so. We've made claims for all our clients, by the way. I'll just add that in. Now, here's where it gets really tight. You've got a really, really tight window now. So for the November 20 period that you're claiming for, and remember, your minimum claim period is a week or 7 days. You can claim for the whole month if you prefer, or you can claim literally on a week-by-week basis. You've just got to make sure you've got the information that you need to put into the claim window. What that information is, I'll explain on the next slide, but one where we've got some numbers. So the November 20 period, you've got until the 14th of December 2020, so 14 days after the end of the month. And as you go, December, you've got until 14th of January 21 to claim. January 21, 14th of Feb 21, and so it goes on. And when the scheme officially ends at the moment, which is March 2021, you've got until the 14th of April 21 to make the claim for that particular month. So really a tighter window. It's not impossible, but you really, really, really got to make sure you're on top of this thing. And again, make sure your accountants are aware of this, which they will be. Accountants have been working really hard. Well, a lot of them have anyway. So make sure they've got that information. Make sure you get those claims in. But there's going to be some responsibility, by the way. And there's some things that you've got to do as an employer to make sure that claim process is done smoothly and to make sure you don't get a letter from HMRC or an investigation from HMRC saying, we want to see this. This is the information that we need. So for me, the spotlight is even greater on furlough claims now. But again, it's a housekeeping exercise, but there's stuff that you need to keep on file. So here's a couple of calculations for variable pay. So I've got somebody I've took on the 20th of March 2020. So they won't have been eligible for the first lot of furloughing. I decide to make them furloughed from the 1st of November 2020. So therefore, the dates that I'm looking at run between, effectively, the 6th of April 2020, that's when I start counting, up to the end of October 20, which is the day before they become furloughed. I've looked at my payroll records, and the gross pay in total for that period of time is £23,000. And that's before stoppages. That converts to a regular monthly figure of 3347, and that's a regular weekly amount of 770. Now the same situation, but this time I've got a member of staff that I took on the end of June 2020. They're also furloughed on the 1st of November, so I count the time and the salary between those dates. The total pay is £7.5 grand. That works out to an average monthly as regular normal pay of £18.40, and that's a regular weekly pay of £423. So you've got time now to get those numbers crunched. Again, it's split. I know some people who did their own claims, which is fine. I know some people who thought, do you know what, accountants, get on with it. Can you do that for us? But you need to make sure those records exist to collate that information. Now, some numbers. What I've done, I've given 3 examples of how the furlough grant is going to work out. Now, I've done them in tranches, by the way, because we actually I've only counted between November and December, because November, so when I say November, December, so effectively that should read, I could read that, yeah, so November, December. In my rush to do that, that should actually read, I put a modified slide. So here we've got November, that should read till the end of January, by the way. So what we've got, the regular wage of £1,500, these are worked out per month anyway. So we've got a regular monthly wage of £1,500, assuming that nobody works any hours, so 0%, that's the grant you're going to get, basically 80% of that regular monthly wage. The employer, you will have to pay the employer's national insurance and the pension scheme. So this is in line with what happened in August furlough claim. So your £86 is your contribution on top of the grant. So the grant gets paid to you. You either get it reimbursed or you pay it over. But you will have to fund the employers and the pension contributions. The government has announced, by the way, in January 21, when they review this, Their view will be whether they think employers can contribute more of the grants, of the furlough payment, and the employer's national insurance is already taken care of. As it goes forward, £2,500, that's a £2,000 furlough grant claim. £4,000, it's a 2.5 because it's going to be capped. Remember, the cap is £2,500. And as you can see, the more that somebody earns, the greater the employer's national insurance and the greater the pension contribution. So the bottom line, factor that into your cash flow. Again, it may change tomorrow, it may change this afternoon, it may even change now as we're broadcasting it. But that's the figures as of literally an hour or two ago. Let's have a look at the last numbers. Now, this is a situation, by the way, what I've done. The furlough grant, the dates on the top should be November to January, but let's have a little bit of a exceptions there. So regular monthly wage, but this time you have got enough work, you've got enough demand where you only want to furlough for 80% of the time and your workers are working 20% of the time. Now, obviously the grant's going to come down, the cap's going to come down as well. So if somebody's on £1,500 per month as their regular monthly wage, you can only claim the grant for the period of time they're furloughed for. So the grant is £960. As you can see, when somebody's on £4,000 a month, well, if you notice there, the grant is only £2,000 because the cap will be reduced to cover the period of time that's been furloughed. Now, as a caveat here, and as a bit of a warning, it's important that you as the employer, apart from all the records that we've talked, apart from all the letters that you sent out to employees, you've got to keep a record of the number of hours they've actually worked in that month and the number of hours you would expect them to work in that month. You can't just say, well, I think they do about 2 days a week. You've got to keep a record, because I suspect that's going to be a spotlight check for HMRC to say, can you show me your records, please, of the hours that have been logged for what they've actually worked and the hours that have been logged for what they should have worked in that time period. If you haven't got that system set up, get something, even if it's light touch, like a spreadsheet or a diary, but you need to work out correctly the number of hours actually worked and the number of hours expected to be worked. Okay, that underpins the claim. Make sure you have that data. Okay, let's talk about self-employed. Again, it changed. There is bad news, as I said. So a lot of people who were registered self-employed after the 6th of April 2019, unfortunately, you're not in the net at the moment. The reasons for that are that at the time that the self-employed grant was announced, it was around about 23rd of March 2020. The tax return 1920 hadn't finished, so HMRC didn't have the tax data. Where we are now, I think that's becoming less of an issue, and there's a lot of noise building up. There has been for quite a number of months where self-employed have been missed out. So watch this space. Again, it's purely a personal opinion. I've mentioned it a few times in my own personal blog posts and broadcasts that I actually think it's a workable scheme, but I'll do that on a roundup at the end. So effectively, average profits £2,000 for each month. The grant is 80%. Now, with self-employed, remember, you can still work. If you're furloughed as an employee, you can't work for the employer. So there's nothing stopping you working. The grant will be paid out in one lump. It's due to be paid out, or the claim is going to be open at the end of this month, November 20. If your profits are higher, there's a cap on the grant, 80%. So it's more in line with the furlough grants. So therefore, up until January, you will be entitled to £2,500 per month. Again, the scheme is being reviewed in January, so we don't actually know at the moment what's going to happen between February and, at the moment, between April. So weirdly, furlough grant ends in March for the time being. Self-employed grant will run up until the end of April. We only know in numbers terms what's going to be paid out on this, effectively this third grant. So again, factor that in to your calculations. I would imagine when the portal opens, which will be the end of this month, first week of December, remember, it's only you as the self-employed person that can claim it. Your agents, your accountants cannot claim it for you. If they do, technically speaking, that will flag up a fraud flag, and that will delay your claim, subject to HMRC not being very happy as well. Now, again, as I said, the conditions still apply, so nothing's moved on this one. You've got to have been previously eligible for the first 2 self-employed grants, even if you haven't claimed them for whatever reason. But you've got to have fit the eligibility criteria, i.e. registered self-employment 18-19, total self-employed profits below 50,000, total self-employed profits at least 50% of your total income. So if you've got property, you've got a part-time job as well as being self-employed, the total income there, self-employed profits have got to be at least 50%. So those same eligibility criteria apply. You don't have to have claimed the previous self-employed grants, but you've got to have been eligible for them. And by self-employed, we're meaning when you come to do your personal tax return, you fill in a section that says self-employed. So if you're a company director, it doesn't mean you. You've got to be sole trader, freelancer, self-employed. You can be a partnership, by the way. That's fine. That's cool. That's perfectly fine, because basically a partnership is just like self-employed people stuck together. So you've got to meet the conditions. Now, again, this is purely a personal opinion. When the scheme was first announced way back in March 2020, at that time, HMRC did not have tax data or tax returns in there to actually know, what the numbers were. So I could see the logic of saying, actually, guys, this is not for you. Because HMRC have actually got all the data, by the way. So you don't have to find all your returns. You don't have to find anything, because it's predicated on you having submitted a tax return by the due date. I think off the top of my head, it's 23rd of April. It had to be in there. Now, where we are now, if I take my own experience from my own firm, we've submitted a significant amount of tax returns already. Statistically, around about this time in November, first week, around about 55% of tax returns would have been submitted. It's quite possible, okay, this is not a government scheme, by the way, it's just a personal opinion. It's quite possible the government could incentivize people to say, look, send us a draft, what you've actually earning, similar to those people who might have claimed working tax credit. We can see what your income and expenditure is. We can see what your profits are. We can work out then a self-employed grant scheme for you. Therefore, we can get that in. When you get your final tax return in January, if you don't do it by, say, November, then they can adjust it accordingly. Secondly, it incentivizes those people to get their tax returns on time, so the government knows what's going on, knows what the tax gap is, what they're going to likely to collect in revenue. So again, this is nothing based on any inside information. I know it might feel like Rishi is communicating with me, but I think there's a lot more argument for saying now the government have got the data, they can collect the data. So am I hopeful? I think possibly we might see something. There's nothing being published. The government are trying to resist that because of financial reasons and lots of other factors, but we'll see what happens. But at the moment, by the way, if you're not part of that scheme, you can't get anything. So sympathy. Just to bear in mind, there hasn't been defined at the moment. You've got to have submitted an 1819 return, and you've got to have been trading or intending to trade in 1920. And your business for this third grant has got to be affected by reduced demand. The government have not yet published details, by the way, what they actually mean by those phrases. But I would certainly think if you're saying if COVID hadn't happened, this is where our business would be. We can see a decline in turnover compared to last year. We know that customers have not come in here. You know that instinctively, you know that intuitively. Make some notes, keep some evidence, because you'll need that to back up the claim. The actual detail, when it becomes available, we'll share that with you straight away. Give me a few minutes, obviously, but it will be shared with you pretty much. So you need evidence to back your claims up. It's subject to tax and national insurance. It's not subject to VAT. And again, penalties, if you effectively, fraudulently claim, innocently claim or whatever, when you shouldn't be, then potentially they'll come back to you and impose penalties. once they find out. Watch out for scammers. Anybody asks for an email link, tell them politely to go away. HMRC will not email you with the details. They will not text you with the details, but scammers are quite horrible people. They will prey on this era of uncertainty. Okay, I've mentioned universal credit. So if your personal finances are being squeezed, then you can still make a claim for universal credit. The minimum income floor, as we said, has been kicked into the grass. Bounce back loan. If you've not claimed the maximum, you can still claim up to that. You can go back and make a top-up loan, so to speak. The scheme carries on until the end of January 21, so that's been extended. What next? Stay calm. Let me mention a few other things as well. Mortgage holidays, they're mandated, so talk to your mortgage company. You're not going to get rid of your mortgage, by the way. You're just going to delay it. Things like credit cards, nothing's officially announced, so talk to your credit card company. Banks were very positive in terms of cutting out overdraft bank charges. That's not done. We as businesses will still have costs to meet. We still have pressures. Nobody's denying that at all. But you've got to keep calm. You've got to do another plan that's flexible. You've got to do your cash flow. And where you need to, reach out and get that support. So, folks, I think that's about it from me today. So thank you for your time. Let me get rid of that screen. Excuse any sort of faux pas or slip-ups on there. I literally just finished this off last night, so we only got the news. But, you know, a little bit of slippage between friends is going to be perfectly acceptable. If you want to get any more detail, if you haven't absorbed everything there, check out the website. If you need any help, if your accountants aren't able to help you, you need that help, check out the website, check out our podcast, reach out for us. We're more than happy to help where we can. Keep calm, stay positive. There'll be, I'm doing another broadcast on, I don't know what I'm going to do on. I'll announce it today. Hashtag replay. I'm just going to leave you in peace now. Have a superb day. We've got lots of more things coming up in that world of uncertainty. So keep that positive. Keep smiling if it's possible. And at least we've got Strictly Comes Dancing that comes back on tomorrow. With that in mind, everyone, have a fantastic day.